All right, and clap your hands for Pastor Justin Kayne.
All right. All right, guys. How's it going? It's good to be back. I feel like we haven't met in a long time. All right, so as usual, I like to start out with the question just to get you guys thinking and get you guys into it, at least so you're paying attention for like 10 seconds of the sermon. All right, so how many of you guys have been excited about trying something new? Only a few people? Everybody, okay. Even better, how many of you guys have experienced success when trying something new? Nice, that's a good feeling. All right, so I'm going to read you guys two very quick stories. These are both true stories, and this is going to segue into my first point. All right, so this is a man by the name of Richard Petty. He was a very well-accomplished NASCAR driver. You guys know NASCAR, right? That's the professional racing, where if you go, you're going to watch guys go around in circles. I think it's like 160 times or something like that. One race, it's crazy, all right? So they go around and around in circles, but I guess there's a lot of skill to it. Anyways, this is a story of this guy named Richard Petty. Looking back on his extraordinary career of 35 years, NASCAR legend Richard Petty noted that during his first 20 years of racing, he had an excellent record of winning. For example, he won the Daytona 500 7 times. That's like the most prestigious race in NASCAR. However, in the late 1970s, his career went into a decline from which it never recovered. Other racing teams had gone high-tech, refining their cars with sophisticated engineering, while the Petty team was set in its ways. And this is a quote from him. He says, "We'd been winning steadily for 20 years and decided we wouldn't change." Petty, one of the greatest racers in history, ended his career without a win in his last 8 years. All right, next little story. This is a gentleman by the name of Chris Johnson. Anybody know who Chris Johnson is? No? All right, Chris Johnson was, at one point, one of the best running backs in the NFL, okay? All right, so at one point in time, Chris Johnson was among the best running backs in football. Between 2008 and 2010, the NFL's 2009 Offensive Player of the Year rushed for 4,598 yards and 34 touchdowns, including an NFL-best 2,006 rushing yards in just his second season in the league. That's incredible. Fittingly, in each of those 3 years, Johnson made the Pro Bowl. But with money rather than football on his mind, the East Carolina product struggled over the next 3 seasons, recording 3,367 yards and just 16 total touchdowns. And after making it to 3 Pro Bowls in his first 3 years, he made it to the prestigious roster 0 times in the next 3. Not surprisingly, the rapid decline led to the Titans cutting the underachiever in 2013. Unfortunately, a change in scenery did Johnson no good, as his 2014 debut with the Jets marked his worst season yet. The fickle back stumbled his way to just 663 rushing yards and 1 measly touchdown, and that was essentially the end of Chris Johnson's career. All right. And so, looking at both of these individuals, something took place in both of their lives that's very dangerous, and we can look at it not just from a standpoint of they had made decisions in their life that affected them in their careers, but as Christians and as followers of Christ, we can experience the same thing in the spiritual realm. We can experience what's known as a spiritual plateau. Anybody know what a spiritual plateau is? Okay, so what a plateau is, it's not, a field. There's 2 different definitions of a plateau. But a plateau I'm talking about is where you are experiencing success, and then eventually you just hit this point where you plateau, where you just level out, and you don't really get any better. And so that can happen to us as Christians, and so we need to be aware of a spiritual plateau in our life. So let's read our first Bible verse. In 2 Samuel 11:1-5, this is talking about King David. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. Trouble. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, "She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite." Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. No good. Now, she was purifying herself from her monthly uncleanness. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David, saying, "I am pregnant." All right, and so in this story, right, this is a common story you've heard a lot, okay? There was a thing back in the day where kings went out to war. It was almost like a season. You would go out to war, you would go out to battle, right? And so David had done it for so many years and had so much success that in my mind, he kind of hit a plateau here. He's like, I've done this, been there, done that. I don't really need to keep doing this, and so I'm going to kind of just take it easy, right? And in that moment, when he was unwilling to keep doing what had made him successful to a certain extent, he fell into some trouble. And so prior to this, David was probably the most accomplished king of Israel. So real quickly, let's just look at some of his accomplishments. King David unified the tribes of Israel and made Jerusalem the capital of the Israelite nation. He is considered to be Israel's greatest king, whose reign ushered in the period in which the first temple was built. David was the first king in Jerusalem, whose reign was later looked back on as a golden era. David brought the ark to Jerusalem. David extended the boundaries of the kingdom. He defeated the Philistines so thoroughly that they never seriously threatened the Israelites' security again. At one point, to save his people from the judgment of a deadly plague, David offered to sacrifice himself and to relinquish God's covenant promise that his throne would endure forever. All right, so David did a lot, and he was a very impactful king over Israel. But him, and just like these two others I talked about, there's a common theme in these various stories in which all these individuals at some point hit a plateau. And so real quick, to give you the definition of a plateau, it is a state of little or no change following a period of activity or progress, or in other words, success. And so you see early on, all these individuals experience tremendous success or progress. However, after a period of time, they had begun to ignore what made them successful. And this is really important to understand this. They hit a point where they were unwilling to change, or for lack of a better word, to continue to grow. And so just like these examples in our lives, we have to be very careful to avoid a spiritual plateau. We have to avoid situations where we are no longer willing to grow. Because when we hit that point, it becomes very dangerous. And so we have moments in our lives when God really moves, and it's new, it's exciting, and it causes us to want to dig deeper in our relationship with God. However, over time, it's very easy to become complacent. The key New Year's resolution and yearly goal for most people, like we've talked about many times, is either to lose weight, right, or to get in shape, right? Everybody, you'll see the gym membership shoot up. Maybe not this year because of COVID. Gyms aren't even open, right? But I'm sure there's probably a lot of people that are like working out in their garages, maybe going on runs. I don't know if you've noticed right now, but there's a lot more people working out outside. And even in this month, I've noticed, at least in my neighborhood alone, there's a lot more people running right now. Probably that's their New Year's resolution, okay? I'm sure in about a month or 2 months, they'll be back in their homes eating donuts and watching Netflix. All right, so most often when people jump back into working out, they experience rapid results in muscle definition and losing weight. Right, Ben? Yeah. All right. So, but nonetheless, at some point, most people hit what's called a plateau, right? And so if you haven't worked out a lot and you decide, I'm going to work out, in the beginning of working out, it's really exciting because you're going to experience fast results in which your body is going from doing pretty much, nothing to being pushed to a certain level. And so you're going to see results, and it's going to be exciting, right? I remember when I first started working out in high school, I was a little twig, and I worked out, and after a couple years, I got a lot bigger, and it was really exciting, okay? But at some point, I hit a plateau to where, I hit my max, so to speak. There are certain things I couldn't go up in. There's just certain things I couldn't push myself in putting more weight on, okay? And so at a certain point, when people are getting in shape, the body adapts to weight loss, and it begins to defend itself against further weight loss. And so they've done a lot of studies that when people begin to get in shape, they experience this rapid success, and then after a certain period of time, the body's like, I can't change anymore. This is not comfortable. This is not healthy, right? Because you're burning so many calories, and your body's experiencing such rapid change. And so the body actually defends itself against further weight loss. It sends up like a defense mechanism. And so numerous studies have shown that when this occurs, the majority of people begin to abandon their workout or weight loss plan altogether, right? That's when a lot of people say, I'm throwing in the towel. I had all this success early on. I hit a plateau. Forget it. I'm done. And so what's really taking place here is that people's bodies are setting up a defense mechanism against further change. This can be us in our lives as well, particularly in our spiritual life or our relationship with God. Sometimes we'll change to a certain degree after we experience God, and then we begin to believe we've changed enough, right? God, you've changed me to a certain extent, and I'm really grateful for that, but I've hit a place where I'm comfortable, right? I've changed enough, right? I'm serving you. I'm happy where I'm at. I'm just going to kind of stay here, right? And I've experienced that a lot of times in my life. And so that's something we have to be very careful of, because the minute we decide we do not want to change anymore or to allow God to change us, we're going to stop growing. The definition of complacency is a feeling of pride or uncritical satisfaction with oneself or one's achievements. So that second part of that definition is really important. A feeling of pride or uncritical satisfaction, meaning when we get to the point where we can no longer be critical of ourselves and we're just satisfied with where we're at and what God has done in our lives, and we're not able to kind of look at ourselves and to examine ourselves and say, you know what, I need to change in this area. I need to grow in this area. Well, not only are we're not going to continue to grow, right? But I promise you, when we hit that point, we're going to begin to experience decline. Proverb 132 says, "For the simple are killed by their turning away, and the complacency of fools destroys them." Proverbs 13:4 says, "The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied." And one more verse. 1 Corinthians 10:12. "So if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall." Right? And so sometimes in our life, when we hit a plateau and we say, I'm comfortable here, and we think we're okay. We think we're standing firm, right? And it's important to know that there is an enemy. There's somebody that is after you that doesn't want the best for you, that wants the exact opposite, right? And so there may be things we've had happen to us in the past where God has got us through, right? And we think we're standing firm now, right? We got through. But the enemy's smart. And so if he does something and it doesn't work, he's going to try another angle. He's going to try some other method that's going to throw you off your game. And so we have to be careful to not become complacent in our spiritual life and our relationship with God. Because if we do, we're going to think, you know what, I'm standing firm, I'm fine. And next thing you know, that curveball is going to come, and you're going to experience the consequences of that. Or we're going to experience the consequences of that. I've experienced the consequences of that. And so the danger of complacency is that it causes us to lose our vision. When we become complacent and we hit a plateau, we no longer have a vision. God, what do you want me to do? We just say, you know what, I'm good where I'm at. A famous quote states that if you're not growing, you're dying. The minute we aren't willing to look at ourselves and to examine our lives, we are disabling change and growth. And with this comes a loss in opportunities or upward movement. And so, bringing me to my third point tonight, my last point. Early success in our lives can cause us to dwell on our past accomplishments and success. And we can begin to rely on our own understanding and our own abilities, right? Sometimes when we have a certain level of success in our life, we begin to kind of get a distorted view of, I did that, right? That was me. I worked hard, whatever it may be. And so we begin to kind of, rest on our accomplishments, rest on our success. And we, through this, can begin to rely on our own understanding and our own abilities. I believe this is one of the major setbacks in our relationship with God and to moving forward. And so, number one, when you hit a spiritual plateau, you're going to become complacent and you are going to lose your vision. And when that happens, your relationship with God may hit a wall. And so we often will hit spiritual plateaus or periods of complacency because we begin to focus on ourselves, our accomplishments, and we are no longer focused on God and the vision He has for our lives. There's been a number of times in my life where I've hit this spiritual plateau, where I'm kind of just going through the motions, right? And I kind of realize, wow, what is my vision? What am I doing? Am I just on this earth to wake up, drink coffee, go to work, talk to a few friends, go to bed, and do that all over again? And sometimes I'm like, man, what am I doing with my life? What is my vision? What does God want me to do? Am I just kind of just hanging out here? And so I hit these moments where I go through this plateau, and I'm like, what's the purpose of this all? And so I have to take time and say, I need to refocus. I need to rethink what do you want me to do, God? I got to spend some time with God and say, what am I doing here? What's your purpose for my life? And so I don't know if anybody else has ever hit that, but that happens to me every now and then. I'm like, man, what am I doing here? And so when we are in that state of mind, sometimes we begin to try and do everything ourselves. And it's not long before we feel frustrated, inadequate, exhausted, disordered, and ultimately out of focus. And so what happens as a result of these things I've been talking about is we ultimately get to a point where we begin to rely on ourselves, right? And so very recently, I don't know, this is just like a theme, just to be honest with you guys, in my life. The enemy tries to attack me through my health. He always tries to attack my health. Why? Because in those moments, I begin to rely on myself. Like, what can I do to get better, right? And then I'm exhausted. I feel inadequate. I feel I'm out of order. I feel like I'm out of focus. And in a sense, I've hit a spiritual plateau where I'm not putting my faith and my trust in God, right? And I'm depending on myself, and it's completely exhausting. And so myself, and like the individuals we looked at earlier in our story, minus David, they were unwilling to change. They hit a plateau, and they never recovered. Opportunity after opportunity passed them by until they finally had to throw in the towel. They no longer could continue to function in the areas that they had great success early on. And so with that being said, don't let that be us. I went through a period of time where I felt stuck and lacked motivation. I realized that the reason for this was because I had lost the desire to change, and my way began to get in God's way. And I was carrying things and difficulties that I could simply have given to God. Psalm 55, verse 22 says, "Cast your cares on the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken." And so when we give it to God, we are putting our life back in focus. And God's will and vision is once again the focal point. And so in wrapping this up, I asked you guys a question earlier on, if you guys have been excited about trying something new, or if you guys have had experience or experienced success when trying something new. Well, coming back to that, what about your relationship with God? Have you ever experienced God in a miraculous way in which you knew it was God and God spoke to you and it changed you and it helped you and it got you through a situation? So have you ever experienced God in that way and over time become complacent? Isaiah 43:18-19 says, "Remember not the former things, nor consider the things of old. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." I love that Bible verse. It says, remember not the former things. Remember not the previous success you had. Remember not what God did 10 years ago, right? Remember not what God did a week ago. But God says, I'm going to continue to do new things. And so I don't want to, and I don't want you guys to miss out on what God's doing. I don't want to look back at my life or right now and say, look what God did in 2010, or look what God did in 2015. I want to see new things happen daily. I want to see new miracles. I want to see new change take place in my life. I want to be excited about the vision that God has given me, right? I don't want to look back and be, oh yeah, I remember when God did that. I want to say, man, God's going to do this tomorrow. God's going to move in my life in this way. And so I don't want us to become complacent and hit spiritual plateaus where we're kind of just looking back at the past. Because God wants to do something new in your life, right? And it's so easy for us to sit there in our lives sometimes and just go through the day-to-day and lose our excitement or lose our passion for what God has done. And so I want us to be excited about what God has for us, that new thing, right? There may be something in your life God's speaking to you about right now where you're like, you had a passion for something a while back and over time it kind of just faded, right? And, you're in high school, you're experiencing different things and different desires than I am right now. But there may be something that you were really excited about, really passionate about. And maybe this stupid, wicked disease kind of crushed that, right? Because we've been in a place where you can't really do much, right? But I want you to experience that again. I want you to have that passion and that desire for what God put in your heart. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it was in the last month, maybe it was in the last year, right? But revisit that again. Allow God to give you a vision again and say, you know what, God, what do you want to do in this upcoming year? Yeah, 2020 was, a bust, so to speak. But a lot of good things happened. I'm not going to say that overall, it was a difficult time, but God moved a lot. But God, what are you going to do in 2021? What are you going to do tomorrow? Forget, the whole year. What are you going to do in my life tomorrow? And so I want us to be excited for that new thing, the new breakthrough, the new opportunity, the new miracle, right? And so I wanted to share this with you guys because so many times, especially at your age and even at my age, I've experienced this where I have success for a period of time, I hit a plateau, and then I kind of just, ride the wave, and I no longer am excited about what God's doing. And the minute I refocus and say, you know what, God, you have this area of my life again, it becomes exciting again. It becomes new. It becomes fresh. And in those moments, there's so much more joy. There's so much more fulfillment. There's so much more, opportunity within those moments. And so that was something that's kind of been on my heart, especially with all that had taken place last year, looking forward into this new year, right? And I thought it'd be, right to share those things that I experienced and hopefully to encourage you guys in that area. So just real quickly, you guys can bow your head and close your eyes. And so this is something that we do every time that we share a lesson with you or something God has put on our heart, is we give you guys an opportunity, and maybe it's not the first time. Sometimes it's important to, rededicate your life back to God. But if there's anybody here for the first time, maybe you haven't experienced God in this manner. Maybe you haven't had that breakthrough in your life where you said, where God's moved and you've seen Him and you've felt Him, change your heart or your, the way that you think. But if you haven't done that and you're here tonight and God's speaking to you, if you feel something inside you saying, you know what, This is speaking to me. That's God. That's not me. And thankfully, God uses us to speak into your lives. That's God speaking through me into you. That is literally the presence of God right now visiting you. And that in and of itself is exciting. That God cares enough that on a Friday night in Santa Monica in a little church building, he wants to talk to you. And so if you're experiencing that tonight, you say, you know what? I want to give this a shot. I want to give my life to God. I want that new thing. I want that exciting thing in my life. I want God to do something big in my life. Go ahead and raise your hand. Maybe you've done that at one point in your life, and God's speaking to you. Maybe God is reigniting a fire in your life that you've had before, and you want to allow God to move in that area once again. So just take another moment here. If you're feeling that, go ahead and raise your hand. All right. Well, we're going to take a moment here. Maybe God has spoke something to you through this, and I hope he has. We're going to take just a couple minutes here at the altar where you guys can come and pray, meet with God, maybe talk to him about certain issues. And so these altars are open. You guys are welcome to come and pray if you'd like. Kind of just a quick testimony I thought I'd share with you guys. I thought it's cool. Is I got sick over break again, and I was kind of dealing with some stuff, and I was just frustrated. I'm like, God, why is this happening again, so to speak, right? And God was speaking to me through that moment. I finally took some time, and God's like, you need to make sure your eyes are on me. Your vision is on me. And so I was in church, and I was like, I'm going to come to church on Sunday morning. I really wasn't feeling that well, and I'm like, I'm coming. And so I was standing about, halfway back, and I was like worshiping with all my heart. I'm like, I'm just giving it back to you, God. Like, God, move right now in this worship time, in this sermon. And God spoke something very specifically to me. And it was really cool. I'm like, wow, God spoke, God's reigniting my vision. It was really cool. And so, church ended. I was talking to people, and then I was walking out this door, and Jenny caught me right here. Gosh, sometimes these things make me emotional. But I was really going through something. And she said, God spoke to me during worship, and the exact thing that God spoke to me, she said word for word. And I was like, whoa, God cares. And so to that level, that's how much God cares about you. That's how much God wants to do for you in your life. And so if you're going through something, give it to God. I promise you, it's the best decision you can make. Because even when you go through difficulties, you can have joy. And you're going to come out on the other end, and God's going to continue to do far and above anything you can imagine. You're going to continue to grow, right? And so don't ever become complacent. Don't ever become to a point where this is it. Because God always has more. I promise you. And so I just thought I'd share that testimony tonight in this sermon. So Jenny, that was awesome. Thank you for that. And so with that being said, Jenny, do you mind closing us in prayer tonight? And then we'll take off.